What's going on, my one viewer? We're about to watch some Amazon. Amazon X. Just watched Nathan Chen with the gold medal. It's good to see an American win the gold medal. Figure skating is such a seriously intense sport. And I don't know if you've ever skated, but it's like seriously not an easy thing to do. I mean, I grew up doing a little bit of skating, and just staying on your feet is like a task in and of itself. And then you think of, like trying to figure out how to do like backward skating and dancing and triple lutz, quadruple lutz. It's crazy. I mean, I don't know. Like hockey players obviously are good skaters, but it's like it's a whole nother level of precision when you get to the figure skating. Like, just to be able to coordinate like music, and I don't know. I was pretty impressed. I was watching it. I was like, dude, this is pretty sick. Then I recently read that the 15-year-old from Russia, Kamila Vitelina or something, she got caught with a performance-enhancing drug. So not so good. Not so good. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't know how much more figure skating there's going to be. If the men's, I don't know if there's still a team. Seems like now we're just waiting on the men's ice hockey. I know women's ice hockey, they lost to, the USA lost to Canada in the qualifying stuff. Doesn't necessarily mean they can't still win a gold medal, but I like the Winter Olympics. I'm a big fan. It's just, I don't know. I grew up in a northern climate, so skiing and skating and all that stuff is like kind of like par for the course. Yeah, I mean, as far as current events, I mean, the Olympics is the big news. There's not a lot of other. Obviously, the Super Bowl's coming up. I'm rooting for the Bengals. Man, LA, I just don't like LA. I'm on the East Coast. I'm not an LA fan. Especially because they got home field advantage with the whole fact that the Super Bowl is going to be in LA. I think that happened last year too. I think Tampa Bay got to host. So I think that'd be kind of questionable if 2 years in a row, the Super Bowl winner got home field advantage. Questionable. Let's see. I mean, as far as the streaming thing, like, it's kind of fun. I mean, I'm crazy anyway, so I talk to myself all the time, like in the car. I'm always like go on these long diatribes about politics and economics and religion and current events. It's like streaming, it's like I'm doing that same thing, but there's potential that people could watch it, I guess. Again, I always get, I don't know if it's a glitch, I always get the one Twitch viewer. Like, so there's just like one person out there who's like, well, I'll hear what this guy has to say. I mean, you hear about people, most of them have like a video game. I mean, I've played a little bit of World of Warcraft. I'm not like ranked or anything, but I could always, I guess I could try to hook that up and play a little WoW. I'm not like very good. I mean, again, I only do like unranked PvP and I do alright. I'm a hunter usually. Because it's so much easier in World of Warcraft to be a hunter. It's like the easiest class. Sometimes I'll be a mage or if I'm healing a priest. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I got tons of time on my hands. For work I do like DoorDash, which is like not very lucrative, but easy. I just drive around, dropping food off. And I mean, truth is that like, I don't know. I mean, between me and my one viewer here, I got a pretty severe mental illness. Honestly, it's kind of a sad story, but I mean, the worst part about it is like my mental illness is it's like most of the time it has to do with like grandiose delusions and like mania, which is obviously annoying. I can totally appreciate that. Like, nobody likes somebody who has like, grandiosity, especially when they don't really have, but it's bad enough if they are actually, I guess like Tom Brady or Michael Jordan or, freaking Joe Biden, like these people, if they were grandiose, it might be annoying, but you could at least be like, hey, that guy's the best athlete or the president or something. But it's just like some schlub off the street. It's like, why is this guy telling me he's the best thing since bread? I mean, most of my grandiosity, it relates to my dad's name. Is like it's kind of a unique name. It's like a Dutch name, and it's like he's named after like a pre-Christian, like I don't know. I guess in some contexts it's like a god, but some other contexts it's like a king. I guess it depends, like a god king. But in Norse it's Odin, but in Dutch it's Wodan. So, me and my crazy mind, I'm like, dude, I'm the son of Odin. Like, kind of like, like I just come up with all these stories that, like, a secretive, like, Asgardian on Earth, and, like, you know, my mission is to, like, eliminate the evil bankers from society, and it gets pretty ridiculous pretty quick. But right now I'm properly medicated, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I definitely have like heathen or just pagan. And pagan sounds more like Greek or Roman, pre-Christian stuff. Typically, like in the culture of pre-Christian European and Scandinavian stuff, they like to be called heathens. That's the common vernacular. Yeah, I mean, when I really get going on like a manic psychotic break, I'm like, I'm a god of thunder. I'm gonna fucking thunder this bitch. It's bad. So try not to go that route these days. I mean, I still have like economic and political opinions, but for the most part, I think it's better to just keep it on the low, not get too intense. Anyway, so the whole being the son of Wodan thing got me in a lot of trouble. Not like no criminal trouble really. I mean, a little bit of brushes with the law, but nothing serious. And but it did definitely get me in trouble with like psychiatric stuff. They were pretty quickly like, because my dad, like, whose name Wodan, he's not about that at all. He's like, dude, chill the fuck out. But when I don't chill the fuck out, they're like, well, then you gotta go to the hospital. And then I go to the hospital, and they're just like, oh, we're gonna medicate you. Do all that shit, which kind of sucks. But I mean, the one, I don't know if I call it a positive, but I don't know. It definitely makes it tough to like. I mean, I've got a few friends, and my family is supportive, so it's not like I'm a total loner or anything, but, I don't know. It just makes it tough to, like, feel like you're, like, a normal part of society when you've, like, seen the type of stuff I've seen in some of these hospitals. And, I don't know. Like I said, I've been crazy. I know how it feels to be crazy, but it's just kind of like, I don't know. It makes it tough to like hold like a regular job. Like, I don't know. Like, I went to college and I'd actually got my bachelor's degree. I mean, after like dropping out halfway through and then going back, and I got in accounting. So I was like, I don't know. I went from being like, I'm gonna be some kind of like heathen son of Odin, god of thunder, to like, well, maybe I'll be an accountant. Oh, what the fuck I was thinking. Because there's, the two things don't really mesh well. I mean, accounting is very, like, organized and detailed and, like, kind of boring, frankly. And, like, I don't know. I lasted, like, first time I tried it. What's up, man? What's up, Kev30? What's going on? We're talking about mental health and accounting and no habla español if you're Spanish, unfortunately. I know a little bit of Spanish. I mean, I took one Spanish class in college. Like, me llamo Zach. And, but I can't, like, really put together sentences. I tried to learn Dutch for a while because my grandfather was from Netherlands. And, ik spreek Nederlands niet. Maar mijn vinnig in de vid. I'm doing it like Kev30. I mean, I'm just kind of going down and I was just watching the Olympics and Nathan Chen about the gold this week, gold for America, talking about how like kind of cool figure skating was, and then kind of went off on a tangent about mental health and why I kind of have ended up in the situation. But yeah, I mean, on the whole, what I was getting to with the conversation is like, you know, at the end of the day, because I got hospitalized quite a few times, like eventually I was like, well, dude, I guess maybe I'm not going to be very good at working like a traditional job. And like I said, now I kind of do DoorDash, but I also, I applied. I mean, as much as there could be drawbacks, I mean, we do live in a welfare state. So I was like, dude, I guess maybe I should apply for the, disability stuff. And I mean, after they saw my record, they didn't take her. I mean, it was like they were like pretty rubber stamped. Like, yeah, this guy probably needs it. So, where do I live? I mean, I live in New England, northeastern United States, which is it's nice in the summer here, but the winter is pretty boring for the most part. How about you, Kev 30? Where do you live? Hopefully West Coast. Because it's here in the Northeast, it's 1:11 in the morning. Probably not a good time to be awake. So I'm trying to see your. I don't know what your avatar is. I can't make it out. Oh, is the music a bit high? I don't know why I haven't. I guess I can turn it down over there. How's that? It's good to critique. I mean, is that I turned it down from 50 to 25. Hopefully that's a more appealing musical. Nice, yeah. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm doing all right. Live in the Northeast, watching the Olympics. I was thinking about turning it back on. They're doing like alpine skiing. Because one thing with the mental illness is like sometimes my sleep schedules. The hardest part, like, for like regular life is like I just don't sleep. I've got like insomnia, wicked. Like it's either like I don't sleep at all for like a long time, and then like I crash for a long time. So it's like nothing is predictable as far as like the idea of working like a regular 9 to 5. I mean, DoorDash is nice because like if I just want to do a little bit of DoorDash, I can just kind of like log on and do it for a couple hours. And I mean, it doesn't pay very well when you consider the fact that you're using your own car and putting the wear and tear on that and everything. But yeah, I mean, obviously, being mentally ill, disabled, I've got a lot of time on my hands. So, like, streaming, it would be kind of cool. I mean, me and my friend earlier today were like trying to do a stream about like films, and we couldn't get anybody. And we talked for like an hour and a half because we're just friends and we talk. And he's got mental illness too, but nobody, not even one. I mean, which is kind of a bummer. But again, we both have a lot of times. He does a little bit of dog sitting, and I do the DoorDash thing. But it's like, it just be kind of cool to find like a community of people to talk to and stuff, I guess. I mean, not that, I mean, again, like in my state, there's all kinds of resources as far as like, we have like mental health communities where they have like clubs and you can go and do like creative writing or art, or they have like kind of talk therapy type stuff, which is pretty cool. But I mean, again, like I was saying, I like to talk. Like one of my favorite things to do is just go for a drive in my car and I'll just talk and opine about this and that and pretend like my opinions, have some, I don't know, it's really just kind of a habit that I do. But I mean, for the most part, you know, like I said, I mean, the biggest problem with my mental illness is like when I get like really into it, I start to really believe that like, you know, I have like some like secretive following of like like secret heathen society, and they're like, dude, that's just on a Wodan, and we're gonna, we gotta listen to what he says, and if he wants to, do something, we gotta do it. And then I'm also very like, I mean, it's a pretty common delusion, like the idea that like the government is surveilling you. But I get pretty in depth on that one. Like I'm pretty like when I'm not really doing well, I'm pretty sure that like there's like so like there's like I said, there's like secret heathen society that I feel like is surveilling me, and then I feel like the government's surveilling me. So before I know it, I feel like you know all these people are listening to my opinions, and I don't know. It's not a very healthy way to live, but you know, it's kind of like I said, I've been that way since I you know turned 17, and there's just not really much I can do about it at this point. I mean, I take the medication, do the talk therapy, but at the end of the day, it's kind of just is what it is. I mean, I don't know. I mean, because I don't know. It would just be like it's one of those things where like I read in like a kind of a self-help book once that like people, it's a pretty common personal feature of humanity that people like to feel important. Like obviously, like maybe not in an ill way, like as if they're like a freaking heathen deity, but like like good psychology is like if you want to kind of make friends with somebody, figure out what they're interested in, and talk to them about their interests, and make them feel like they're interesting or important. And typically they'll respond well to that. Um, and in the book that I read, that it's actually like like again, like when you get into the severe wanting to feel important, it's a pretty typical psychiatric problem where people will, create like delusional reasons to feel important. Almost more particularly if they have some reason to feel like they're not important, whether it's, some disadvantage of some sort, it's pretty common for people to, create a system of beliefs around themselves where they're much more important than they really are. And again, I'm not a victim in like that sense, but like I suffer from that problem of feeling like there's like you know that I'm like just somebody. But the reality is like again, I live in some small town in the Northeast, and I mean, again, a few people know who I am and my community, but I don't think there's any larger acknowledgement of my existence for the most part. Um, but it would be cool if there were. So it's like it's always tempting to be like it's kind of like a drug. It's like because it just like that feeling of importance and power. I feel like it just short wires the pleasure centers of your brain, and like you know because I would imagine, I mean, as far as psychosis goes, like again, when you convince your brain that you're powerful and important, you know you probably feel similar to like it actually feels to be powerful and important. So it's like you basically get the kind of chemical reaction in your brain that celebrities and presidents and famous athletes, you get like the same feeling. It's just unfortunately the reality doesn't match the feeling, and you know so it's destined to kind of cause problems. But as far as streaming, I mean, like I said, I got a lot of time on my hands. I mean, supposedly people make money at this. I mean, I don't know, how exactly you would make money. I mean, I guess if people, I think like Twitch has stuff where you can like send money. I don't know. I just, I've never sent like a streamer money. I don't know how, like, what would compel somebody to do that. I mean, but that's not really why I'm doing it. Anyway, I don't have any real plans of making money. It's mostly just because I like to talk anyway. Um, and it was nice to have a chatter. That's kind of how it was. It was kind of cool. Sometimes, like, there'll be one person on, and it's like nobody will chat. Wow. I don't know really what that's all about, but yeah, we covered mental illness pretty thoroughly. I don't know. I'm trying to think what else to talk about. I mean, the news that I was looking is they're still talking about student loan forgiveness, which would be pretty sweet. I've got like 34,000 in student loan debt, which sucks. I mean, if I could go back, I probably would have opted not to go to college, but it just seemed like it was a good choice. I mean, because like when I first started college, I'd only been in the hospital twice. I still wasn't really sure as far as like whether or not this was going to be like a serious problem. I mean, granted, the people in the hospital definitely made clear that it was going to be a serious problem, but I had like kind of convinced myself that like, they just kind of misinterpreted what was going on. And then I did like 2.5 years in like engineering, and then I had like a really bad problem in the hospital, and the point is that like I still thought, even after the serious hospitalization, going back, I was like, I think I can still pull off like a normal life. So it seemed, to be a reasonable choice to try to finish the degree. I mean, for one thing, I have, some college, no degree didn't seem like it was worth anything, whereas like at least a degree would give me some opportunity. And to be fair, it did. Like, when I finished my degree, I was in a pretty good place. I had a good support team, good medication, and I got like a public accounting job. And they hired me on. It was like $55,000 a year. I thought like, man, I got it made. But then like, I don't know. I got the intern. When I did the internship, it was fine, and everything was going well in the summer. I went back. When I went back, I only lasted like 2 or 3 weeks, and I don't know. I just, for some reason, I don't know. I just felt like, for one thing, I realized that the office situation was kind of difficult as far as like, because one of the features of my illness is like I have like paranoia, right? So like I already felt that, people were kind of like conspiring against me, and I think like the last straw was like, I don't know, one of the partners at the firm like brought his old like Catholic school teacher, like nun lady in. And I was just convinced that she was like screwing with me. Or like the whole situation was screwing with me. I don't know. Because like the paranoia, you know, it's like, it's usually related to the grandiose delusion, more or less, in some feature, or the government surveillance delusion. Like they're very inter, interwoven in terms of like I have the paranoia because I feel like people secretly know about this whole heathen son of Odin thing, or they secretly know about the government surveillance. So like I said, I mean, basically, they brought that Catholic nun in, and I was like, dude, they're screwing with me. And I don't know. I felt like I was being like, I don't know. I just couldn't handle it, frankly. So I basically quit, and then I got another opportunity like a year or so later. This much smaller firm, which is basically a sole practitioner who had a couple employees, and that was like easier. It was going pretty well, but I was like just really depressed and like I wasn't really like paranoid or delusional. I just was like, dude, this is like not what I want to do. And I mean, frankly, from that one, I never really got fired or quit. It just COVID happened, and my boss was like, "Hey, man, look, they're like giving all this unemployment benefit stuff out, and you're kind of struggling with showing up to work and being depressed and stuff. So maybe, if I just say, lay you off, and maybe it'll be a win-win." And it was, and it gave me the opportunity to kind of focus on some stuff in my mental health, primarily like substance use, and try to get as sober as I could, at least off of alcohol and marijuana. And then 2020 was just a crazy year to begin with. I mean, I don't know. The whole thing just kind of blew up in my face near the end, and like, before I knew it, I was like feeling like I had to like rally an army to. I don't know. It's crazy. Point is they're thinking about forgiving student loan debt, which would be, I think, it would be pretty nice. But at the same time, I also can appreciate that it wouldn't really be fair to the people who paid their student loan debt, and it might not be good for the economy as far as inflation and things like that. But I mean, and then my other problem is that the federal government just guarantees $20,500 of graduate loans. That drives me nuts because like it's just like money on a platter that it's like I'm always thinking like, well, should I just do graduate studies and take the money? Because I mean, it's like an old adage as far as credit that most people will take, or at least be tempted to take, as much credit as you offer them. And again, the government just like rubber stamps, this $20,000 for basically anybody who has a pulse. So it's like very difficult to resist the temptation to just be like, well, I mean, sometimes I'm just like, well, maybe I'll just go get like a freaking creative writing degree and try to be a writer or something. But so far, 4 years after graduating, I've been able to resist. So hopefully I can keep on resisting. And it doesn't help that in my situation, being disabled, it's like the way that the federal loans are structured, it's like even if no matter how much I take, there's always going to be repayment programs, or I could even potentially get it totally forgiven based on disability status. So it's like again, it's just tempting to be like, well, I could just study some topic I'm interested in, whether it's economics or English or films or whatever, finance, and like it's not basically it would, increase my cash flow for a couple of years and if I stayed in the disabled status, I likely would never have to pay it back in full. But like I said, ethically, I think it's bad in the first place to do that because at this point, I'm not totally convinced, but I think the probability is that I'm never gonna, it's somewhat unlikely that I'm ever gonna really, achieve gainful employment. It's not totally out of the question, but based on my life as an adult, seems like it's gonna be seems like the evidence is more on the side that I'm not going to be gainfully employed, which means, there's no reason to take on, debt for education if it's not going to help increase my employment income. Like I said, I've been able to resist for just over 4 years, so I think I'll just keep resisting. And for what it's worth, I did find out, with my disability, I can still get a Federal Housing Authority home loan. It's not for very much. But where I live, you can find, small residences like trailers and, kind of like cabin-like structures for about what they were saying I could get in loans. So, that seems like a more reasonable, taking on of debt, because at least then, they would hopefully secure housing. But anyway, that's probably not very interesting to somebody else. But those are the type of things that I concern myself with. But yeah, definitely. But for like that FHA loan, it would definitely help if they forgave my student loans. I don't know. Now is the time to do that too, because everything that the Fed's indicating is that, in a couple of years, interest rates might be much, much higher than they are now. Yeah, those are the problems I face. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of problems with mental health treatment in general. The pharmaceutical methods are sometimes, I wouldn't go so far to call them inhumane, but, there's some pretty serious reality that a lot of the pharmaceuticals have pretty severe side effects as far as, I spent the first 25 years of my life pretty fit. My BMI was good, and I was probably like almost 6'4", like 180 to 200 pounds. But as soon as they started, not forcibly, but as soon as they convinced everybody in my life that I had to take medications, now it's like, my weight's almost out of control, and it is out of control to a large extent. But that's definitely the biggest problem. Is it just seems like a lot of the pharmaceutical options screw with your metabolic rate and your desire for food. I don't know. And then, I would say the social services, they're pretty decent for the most part, but it's always a question of, there's only so many resources to go around, and I don't know. It's pretty sad. Don't get me wrong, like, nobody would want a serious mental illness. I mean, if they had the option not to have it. I mean, there's no real benefits to having a serious mental illness. I guess sometimes in the manic euphoria, there's some illusory benefits. I mean, there might be some marginal creativity benefits, but again, for the most part, it's very destructive and, mostly a pretty sufferable path as far as living life. But then again, I mean, life in general is, marred by suffering. Get into the suffering Olympics. I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, I would say for the one thing, it's definitely way better to have a serious mental illness in a reasonably liberal, developed nation like America than it would be, in some third world country. I mean, I don't even know, as far as like certain, like African and South Asian countries, I don't know. Central American, I don't know how they treat mental illness. It's probably not very good. I don't really look into that, but like I said, put things in perspective. I mean, it does suck, but like I said, it could be worse. And like I said, I mean, life. One of the defining qualities of life, as we know it here on this planet, is suffering. I mean, for one thing, everybody dies. I mean, everybody gets sick. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the bottom line is like, my perspective is you can't succumb to the suffering outlook. And from my perspective, like I said, it might be difficult to, find a way towards gainful employment, but it doesn't mean I can't have a reasonably fulfilling life with friends and family and interests and activities and things like that. I mean, another thing is like if you look at the history of mental health treatment, even in this country, there are some problems as far as pharmaceutical and acute treatment, but definitely way better than it was 50 years ago. I mean, before they changed the system of community-based treatment, I mean, usually people with my condition, you pretty much were put into an asylum indefinitely with very little hope of ever leaving that asylum. Which at that point, no, I've been in places that used to be these asylums that are now more or less used for more temporary purposes. And I mean, when you're in there, it's like anything, you adapt. I mean, humans adapt. I mean, yes, it would definitely suck to be told that you're indefinitely placed in an asylum, but you could still make the most of it. I mean, for one thing, back in those days, they would have like work, I mean, a lot of at least where I live, those places were like not totally self-sustaining, but they would have like farms and you'd grow your own food and do productive things. Because again, I mean, really, my life at this point, I mean, with a couple exceptions, most of my interactions are with the mental health, other mentally ill people. I mean, it's just, obviously not all of my interactions, like as if I was in an asylum, but it's, still a lot of them are. I don't really know. I mean, bottom line is, like I said, definitely sucks. Wouldn't it's in the it's definitely up there as far as things that people wouldn't want to have inflicted on them. But definitely could be a lot worse. And I mean, there's some, especially in the arts, but even in, you know, maybe not so much the sciences, but the arts, there's some pretty well known people with serious mental illness. I mean, whether you want to look at Van Gogh, Sylvia Plath, Virginia Woolf, Steve Nash, I mean, those are the four that come to mind immediately, but all four of those people had serious mental illness. And, they made a huge impact on the world. I mean, there's another mathematician. He came up with like theorem on sets of infinity. He was insane. Obviously, they're the super minority. I mean, even with the minority that is people who are seriously mentally ill. But like I said, I mean, I think there's still ways to make a difference, or I don't know. It's kind of melancholy. I mean, for one thing, a lot of times, like in the different like group therapies, like again, it's like the current model. It's like this balancing act where, to some extent, well, to a large extent, you have to accept the reality of the diagnosis. But it's a question of like, how do you accept the reality of the diagnosis and still have an identity that's not completely consumed by the diagnosis? And it is a difficult thing because, it takes, for me at least, sometimes it's like I don't want to accept the reality of the diagnosis. And I try to think in terms of, my life without the diagnosis. And then, if I do get to the point of accepting the diagnosis, then it's difficult to think of my life, outside of those terms. But, yeah, like I said, it's overall, yeah, just try to do the treatment. And as far as, my goals, it's like, as long as I can stay like maintaining some semblance of, non-acute status, that's kind of the least worst outcome. Because the reality is like acute status is just terrible. I mean, not only is it terrible for yourself and your own life, but it's also very expensive for society. I mean, like these hospitals are very expensive, and the ER treatments, the ambulance runs, all the different things that happen in acute care. So yeah, my major goal is just, I feel like as long as I can stay out of acute care, then I'm at least, not at the worst, and I can try to make small steps towards something productive. And like I said, I do DoorDash, which, again, I mean, it's not really a huge contribution. Nobody really needs to get their food delivered. I mean, some people might, but for the most part, it's a luxury service. Um, but I also, like I said, there's a lot of opportunity to get involved in the community of, mentally ill people. In my state, we call it the peer community. And that can have a positive impact where, you can help people socially and, just kind of help each other out by, you know, being there for each other. And I don't know, kind of sick of talking about mental illness. It is a big part of my life, but it's, you know, I mean, again, it's like, it would be much better not to have mental illness, and then I could be like a normal person, but it's not who I am. But I mean, the real frustrating part is like the reason I'm primarily I don't know. I mean, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, they claim that it's a chemical, or at least their theory is that there's, chemical reactions in the brain that, make people mentally ill or mentally, neurotypical. They don't have a lot of, evidence to back up that theory, from what I understand. So the other causes of mental illness are usually like environmental or, like psychosocial reasons. And, don't get me wrong, I have my fair share of, psychosocial reasons. I mean, I had a lot of trouble with my mother, and, she also was diagnosed. And, I didn't really grow up with my mother, but, she was always there in my life, and I had to sort of watch her struggle through her life as she tried to, make the best of what she could. And, my dad, from what I can tell, is neurotypical, and, he has to be neurotypical for what he does. But yeah, so the psychosocial reasons would definitely be my mother, and then again, I could have inherited some genetical chemical imbalances, and that's pretty much it. But again, not again. But what frustrates me is my coping mechanism is to go, off the deep end into, the Son of Wodan stuff, and it's just. I mean, to be honest, it's very difficult because, it's so much more appealing to think of myself as like a Asgardian hero when I compare it to thinking of myself as a seriously mentally ill person. Because you can see how, like, I can convince myself that, like, well, society just misinterprets my behaviors and actions because we don't live in a period of time where the type of like Asgardian hero act type of stuff would be valued. And but if I'm honest with myself, it's just a coping mechanism, and doesn't really, But it's also difficult for me because my dad, for all that he did right, he was part of a very difficult Christian religion, the Jehovah's Witnesses, and got basically kicked out of there, and never really, raised me with any specific, religious context. And I mean, we never went to church. We never. I mean, I think I've been to church with my dad once for like a Christmas thing when I was real young. Um, so like I said, I mean, I'm not blaming my dad, but it's like he definitely left the door open for me to come up with some wild theories about, who I was and what my position was in the world because, again, I didn't have any, I mean, other than, public education and, you know, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I just mean to say that, like, you know, I was obviously, when I reached adulthood, I was like searching for, like, well, what is my spirituality? I mean, I'm not raised Christian. I mean, obviously, my dad, because of the Jehovah Witness thing, wasn't like, big into religion anyway. And, I had said my mother was, I mean, if my dad wasn't big into religion, my mother, biological mother was like, she hated it. I mean, to the point where she was like openly practicing witchcraft and shamanism and shit. So like, I mean, that's what I was looking at. Is like I had this mother who, pretty openly proclaimed herself a shaman and did like the tarot card readings and astrology. My dad, just didn't really talk about it much and said that, his family was his religion. And, I did have a stepmom and her parents who were, relatively conservatively religious, but I don't know. I don't know if I just never really, again, never really invited me to. I don't want to blame them like they didn't invite me, but I don't recall them ever really encouraging me to go to their church or anything. I mean, now my Nana has offered a couple times recently, but so anyway, the whole thing of like having a mother who, was kind of dealing with psychosis and, exploring astrology and tarot cards and shamanism, having a father named Wodan, and, not really encouraging any specific tradition. I don't know. I mean, it just. And then, like I said, in my own life, when I was 17, I had this like spiritual experience or psychotic break, depending on how you look at it. And, again, like when that happened to me, it was like, up until that point, I mean, I had some eccentric behaviors and definitely wasn't, a model child, especially when it comes to certain things like, certain behaviors around Christianity. But, I was relatively normal. I mean, I was playing sports, I got good grades, I was involved, I worked jobs, and, just, again, I wasn't perfect, but when 17 hit me, after I got back from Germany, again, I just had this like strong, again, it was diagnosed as a psychotic break, but it felt as though, there were spiritual elements that were like reaching out to me that, again, I felt as though there were external spiritual forces that were trying to sort of open my eyes to this idea that I could be, something greater than, a normal person, and that not only that I could be, but I had to be, and that it was almost my responsibility And again, a lot of that could have been psychosocial from having my mother and her practices, and I did immediately start to think it could be something to do with my dad's name and you know the circumstances of my life, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, when I had that psychotic break or that sort of spiritual awakening, you know, I didn't have any context to put it in. I mean, like I said, I was pretty sure that it had nothing to do with Christianity or Judaism or any of that because, I had nothing to do with any of that. I didn't really know much about heathenism or those type of things at that time, so I wasn't sure. I thought maybe it had something to do with my dad's name and those sort of things. But the bottom line is, then after that happened to me, I set about trying to find out, like, what would have caused that. I mean, obviously, I wasn't eager to accept the, you know, rationale that it was a chemical imbalance and that, it was just a psychotic break, because again, from my perspective, it was very external to me, and there was forces that were external. So bottom line is, I sort of, I mean, a lot of things happened, but a couple of things that happened were, one, I started looking into, alternative spiritualities, occult spiritualities, some of the stuff my mother was into, a lot of the heathen stuff. But I also looked into, I don't want to say greatness, but, for a second thing, I started to be very curious about, like, well, what are the power dynamics, as far as, like, where does power come from, and who's powerful, and how does power work as far as political, economic, social power. And those are a couple of things that happened. But I also, struggled with substances, and you know the difficulty of having a very public, psychotic break, and relationship problems, and but I did follow follow through, in the sense of, I traveled to South Florida to work at this very upscale kind of WASP club that and kept trying to learn more. And again, I didn't totally exclude biblical ideas, but I felt that I was not really a part of that. um, and then I ended up meeting a girl and getting into a relationship with a relatively prominent New York family, and you know learned some more there. And again, that didn't end well, but I don't know. I mean, the point is that I guess going back to that initial psychotic break, now 13 years later, it's still difficult for me to accept that, not only that psychotic break, but all the other things that have happened in my life over the past 13 years are all just the emanations of mental illness. I mean, but they very well may be. I can't say that, categorically they're not. I mean, but, I mean, I'm gonna wrap this up here. It's 2 o'clock my time. The bottom line is that when it comes to mental illness, I mean, it is a modern phenomenon, and you know, I don't think, as far as my analysis, that a lot of the so-called prophets and you know heathen heroes. I mean, if a lot of the people from ancient history had to be put into the context of modern psychiatry, I think you'd find a lot of the people who I mean, even look somewhat more recent, like Gandhi. I mean, if you tried to pull a Gandhi and say, I'm not going to eat until, peace is resolved, they'd lock you up in a mental hospital. I mean, nobody would be like, oh, okay, go for it. But, you look at, like, the prophets and, I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, obviously, anybody who said, the type of stuff Jesus Christ said, they'd be immediately locked up. I mean, and the same thing goes for a lot of the heathen folk heroes of, the legends about, warrior priests and berserkers. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that, I accept that under the modern context I have a mental illness, but I don't think I'm totally wrong by suggesting that a lot of the things that have happened to me, may have been treated differently under, if it was a different historical context. But I guess it's 2 o'clock now. Thank you for my one viewer. If it's Kev30, have a good night.